Thanks for sticking around, everyone.
Yeah,
Please welcome back Dan again. So we've got about 15 minutes of questions. I'm sure you'll have plenty to ask, but I'll ask a couple to kick us off. So I feel like and I'm sure plenty of other people have been waiting a long time for a movie like this. Without naming any names, there's so many other films that attempt to kind of make a portrait of adults with developmental disabilities and do so in a kind of condescending and
reductive,
in a way that doesn't lend them much agency. And I think one of the greatest strengths of this film is how much power it views Dina and Scott. Could you talk a little bit about how you approach working with them and to what extent they were kind of collaborators in the film?
Well, thank you first. No, I mean like that's something that we were very conscious of when we started working on the project. That typically it's a kind of patronizing tone. It's very cutesy usually what you see. And I think that like theoretically, if we can accept the fact that like Scott and Dina are whole, complicated individuals with their own history and ambitions and dreams, then they should have media that represents them in that way. And tells their story with as much dignity as it deserves. But yeah, I've known Dina since I was born. We grew up together. My dad was her teacher in high school, and he started a group for developmentally disabled adults after she graduated, and they still meet bi-monthly in the basement of like the local library. And I just grew up going to these meetings. So everyone in the film I've known, my entire life. Frank and Monica and Laura, and Patrick and Jenny and everyone. So when it came time to go down, and I mean, initially we started much wider than what the film looks like now. We didn't exactly have an idea what a story like this could look like. I knew that Dina was getting married again, and I knew of her history. So we thought that it could be interesting to follow that, but maybe also spend time with other people in the group. And our first film has 9 protagonists, so that was our initial concept. We would just go down and check it out, what was happening. But Dina very quickly swallowed the entire thing. She has a lot to say, and she was very eager to tell her story, and she's a very generous collaborator in that way. And the film really was a collaboration between us and her. She's seen multiple cuts of the film as we were developing it. She came to Sundance with us, her and Scott. We're going on a road trip next week from New York to Washington, D.C., back to New York. So my life with Dina, it continues far beyond the 101 minutes of this film. Just like it started way before I ever picked up a camera. So it's been a wild ride. It's weird going back to where you're from and filming that landscape that you took for granted so often, and now everything becomes so much more significant. That was a windy answer.
No, that's a wonderful place to get us started, I think, and in fact a good note to open it out to the audience on, perhaps. So if there are questions, we'll come to you. Let's go in the aisle here. Do we need to wait for the mic to get there? Bear with us for a second.
You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know, that breaks the cardinal rule of film festival Q&As.
Right, yeah?
Yeah, I think the police are listening in, and if we do it without the mics,
they're going to be so mad at us.
Person? You alright with it?
Yeah, which person?
Oh, in the aisle here, this guy.
I just wanted to ask about the decision to shoot it all on the sticks, and I really liked it. I thought it worked really well. But what I wanted to ask is, were you ever worried that you would miss moments because of that, and what additional challenges did that add when you're filming observationally?
I guess, yeah, you're always a bit concerned that you might miss something that's valuable. I think this particular approach required a lot of confidence. We kind of talk theoretically before we even really start to build the film. And I think like for this particular film, it was really premised on and built from this place where we trusted in the fact that like simplicity can like lead to very profound realizations. So, you know, in a way, kind of building a very strict and structured container actually freed us up to play within it. You know, something like the apartment, it's like, I know that apartment like the back of my hand. I know like exactly which floorboards creak when we walk on them. I know that when they go into the living room, there's 3, sometimes 4 places where the camera can live, and there's only like 2 lenses maximum that can be used in that space. In the kitchen, there's 3 areas where you can live unless you're filming the hallway. In the bedroom, there's 2 spots. So like if you know that, then things start to work like clockwork. With our first film, you know, it wasn't this formal, I guess. And you know, I think that led us to a place where we were really trying to show everything and capture everything. It's a much more eager film. It's younger and it's rawer. This, I think that we were working for confidence, while also, you know, holding true to this idea that Dina can carry a film on her own, that she is sufficient. But then also holding back to see how she really interacts with space. You know, we were studying like a lot of Tati, and he's the master of space, the bureaucracy of how we move through space. And it's great to see how he interacts with not only space in general, but also modern space. And Dina does that very well too. The way in which she kind of cracks through certain facades and interacts in certain areas in unexpected ways, I feel like we couldn't really capture if we were in a close-up, for example. So to go on sticks, I mean, yeah, it's like one of those decisions that we made that I feel like I could give like a dozen reasons for now. Because it's like something that we were like, okay, cool. We messed with the Steadicam for a while, but then this seemed to make sense. And for a host of reasons that I feel like kind of keep growing and coming to me in my own mind. Like a more highfalutin response is that like I was studying a lot of Foucault too. Like Madison Civilization was what I turned to, just like the history of sexuality was what I studied when we were working on our first film. So my question was, how can we frame someone like Dina in a more classical way as opposed to like a more modern, medicalized, clinical way? How can we portray her as the person that she actually is, who really tests the limits of our logic, and shows how we could be interacting with each other differently? How can we appreciate her for these things rather than reduce her to something more plastic? I'm rambling.
No, not at all. Should we go straight behind you? If you could just pass it back.
Hello. I just wanted to ask about Dina's father. I got the impression that maybe he didn't approve of the relationship. He seemed absent from the wedding. I just wondered if you could expand upon that.
Yeah. It's difficult to speak about that relationship because it's like I don't want to psychologize him in any way. But I think that if I were to have a daughter who, you know, got married once before and suffered the tragedy of losing her partner, and then went out and started dating in the world again and fell into this very abusive relationship that again caused her further trauma. I mean, she was in a coma for 3 days after that. I like to think that I have the capacity to be weary that they are again allowing somebody else to come into their home, to share their bed, to open herself up to vulnerability again. And I think a more generous approach to thinking about that relationship is to consider it like that. Yeah. Sorry.
Should we go to the very eager person at the back there?
Sorry, I just don't know if you can see me because I feel I'm quite in the dark.
Oh, you're making yourself seen, it's fine.
I'm shy. I wondered, because it almost seems that some of the scenes, like what you're talking about, what the people are talking about in the film, is almost like fictionalized in the way that it's set against like an incredible backdrop, or everything is just perfectly framed. And I wondered how much you produced each scene, or how much was just
Right.
captured
Yeah.
as it.
I mean, it's a bit hard to quantify, right? Because like our sets, like it's more of like a dance. It's more of like kids on a playground. You know, like we show up to her house and we're like, hey, Dina, like, let's play today. What do you want to do? There's plenty, like there's 550 hours of footage that we shot, you know, so for every scene where they're watching television, there's 2 hours of them watching television, you know. The crazy thing about the film, and especially the locations in particular, I feel like a lot of people want to give us credit for like where they ended up on their honeymoon, because it seems all too surreal. But you know, I grew up with like late night commercials advertising for that place because I grew up with them in that area, and that's a couples resort that was built in the 80s and has obviously not been touched since. And when I heard that Scott had rented a room there and borrowed money from his mom to pay for the room there, I was like, this couldn't be more perfect. I think part of the approach too is just like really accepting the fact that like people cast themselves very well. If you're gonna show up and consider that your job is to be there and to listen, then you're gonna find out a lot about the person, how we sit, where we choose to sit, who we choose to talk to, how we talk to that person. If that's to be filmed, all of that will then say something about us. And we had the luxury of literally 550 hours of footage with them. But no, none of it was scripted either. You know, it's like Scott like literally speaks like a Shakespearean character. Like I had never heard somebody say like, you know, if I had been through what you had been through, I would have possibly perished by now. I think that's a beautiful line. Dina too, like she has lines that like I would love to take credit for writing, but when she's sitting with him on the bench and she's like, you know, I've had the experience of lovemaking. Like I think it's a gorgeous thing to say. It's a beautiful way to put it. But again, like that book, like it's like that was a conversation that she had with Scott's parents about how to get him to open up. And his mom, who's a nurse, suggested that she buy him The Joy of Sex, and then they approached the discussion that way. So we filmed her going to the bookstore and buying the book and leaving with the book. None of which is obviously in the film, but this is very much their lives and them interacting. But at the same time, it's like when you show up with a camera, like it is a dance, you know. So it's hard to say exactly how much or a percentage is us and how much is them. But I guess I mean most of it is purely them, which is probably the answer.
We've probably got time for like 2 more in the middle here.
Really wonderful film. I loved it. I wondered about the 911 call because I thought you included it really sensitively. I wondered how you came to that decision of how to include it in the film. Did you move it in different cuts, or did you always know you wanted to put it over that really beautiful shot?
No, I got the 911 call like pretty early on, before they were married, before the honeymoon happened. It was just part of like the research, kind of going through like the case. I met with like the district attorney in Pennsylvania, and then the case had been so significant for him that like everything was like literally on his desktop, on his laptop, years later. And you know, I talked with Dina, we had her on the phone, it was like, am I okay to get this? Are you cool with that? And then I went through the process of just like listening to it as many times in a day as I could for like the span of like a week and a half, to kind of try and overcome like my initial like emotional, very visceral reaction to hearing it, which doesn't ever really go away, but I just need to figure out how to work with it. My first inclination was that we should just play it over black, and that everyone watching the film should have to suffer through it. And when our editor was playing with it, she found that sunset shot, which was also very serendipitously shot. And she put it on top of that, and it worked perfectly.
Maybe one more down the front.
Logistically, in terms of filming it, because you got very intimate moments, are you actually present there, or are you leaving the camera and leaving for a little bit and just kind of seeing what happens?
Right, it depends. I mean, like sometimes we would like leave the camera and like we would sit in the kitchen and and listen from the kitchen. Sometimes we had like a remote monitor that we could actually see exactly what we were getting. Other times we were standing right next to the camera. So yeah, it really depended on the situation.
We could probably squeeze in one more if anyone's got a final thought.
Well, this is a follow-up to that question. What were the conversations you had around making sure that it was
She's
like,
taken care of?
like, I mean, no offense, but personally, I wouldn't like you present during my honeymoon. Like, how were you able to make sure that that was okay?
So the honeymoon, you know, we again talked with them about, you know, what they thought that they needed. Like, they had like 2 days on their own, and then we like showed up, and then we like went into their room and like hung out with them and got this scene of them taking the bath. And then we like left. And then we drove back up to the Poconos, which is like a 3-hour drive from Philadelphia, to pick them up and then drive them home afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it's like they don't drive either, so it was also kind of an opportunity. Like, I know that, like, for example, that shot while the sun is going down, Scott really wanted chicken parmesan, and they didn't have chicken parmesan at the resort. So it was like an opportunity to be like, okay, Dan, like, you're here, so like, can we go out to an Italian restaurant, because I really want chicken parm. So, you know, it was again like this like sort of mutual like, yeah, we're here, we have the car, like, let's go do it after we like spend a day just following you guys and what you guys are doing.
I think we better call it a night there. Thanks everyone for sticking around.
Chicken.
Don't forget to vote in the Audience Award, and thank you to the festival and again to Dan.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Get home safe. Cheers.
Good night.